I was Sergeant William Holt of the 11th Light Dragoons before I was anything else, and I do not apologize for the things I saw in the war. A man sees what he sees. He carries what he carries. And when he comes home, if he comes home, he finds a quiet corner and does useful work and tries not to remember the sounds. I came home with the Duke of Pemberton in the spring of 1815, after Toulouse, after the long retreat, after the winter in the mountains that killed more men than the French ever did. I had been his Batman, his personal servant, his shadow, the man who cleaned his boots and loaded his pistol and held his horse when the shelling started. I had seen him lead a cavalry charge at Salamanca with a composure that made the other officers look at each other and wonder if the man felt fear at all. He did. I knew it, because I heard him breathing in the dark before every engagement. Fast, shallow, controlled. And I knew it because after every engagement, he sat very still for a long time and said nothing, and the stillness was worse than any trembling. He was beautiful once. That is a strange word to use for a soldier, for a duke, for a man who stood 6'2" in his stockings and had shoulders that blocked a doorway. But he was beautiful, dark-haired, strong-featured, with eyes that women across 3 countries had written poetry about, though he never read the poetry and would have been embarrassed if he had. He was the Duke of Pemberton. He had 12,000 acres, a seat in the Lords, a house in Mayfair, and a face that made people stop and look when he entered a room. The fire took the face. It was not battle. It was not heroic. It was a lantern in a stable behind the lines at Vittoria, and a horse that kicked it over, and the straw that caught, and the Duke going in because his mare was inside, and he would not leave her. He got the mare out. He did not get himself out in time. The left side of his face, from the temple to the jaw, across the cheekbone, pulling the corner of his mouth, burned. The surgeons did what they could, which was not much. The scarring healed tight and shiny and dark, and it pulled the skin so that the left side of his face was a different landscape from the right. His left eye survived but was permanently narrowed, half hidden behind the ruined lid. His mouth pulled to one side. When he spoke, only the right side moved naturally. He stopped looking in mirrors. He stopped attending Parliament. He stopped going to London. He came home to Pemberton Hall, a vast, cold, beautiful house in Derbyshire, and he closed the doors and drew the curtains and lived like a man in exile in his own country. I stayed. I was his groundskeeper now, officially, but I was still his Batman, in every way that mattered. I maintained the grounds. I managed the outdoor staff. I kept the poachers off the south woods and the curious away from the east gate, because people came, sometimes, the morbidly fascinated, the pitying, the young women of the county who had heard about the scarred Duke and wanted to see for themselves, as though he were an exhibit and not a man. He saw no one. He wanted no one. He read in his library and walked the grounds at dusk when no one could see him, and ate his meals alone, and the years went by like water through a crack, slowly, steadily, wearing everything smooth. 3 years after Toulouse, his mother, the Dowager Duchess, a formidable woman who had buried a husband, raised 3 sons, and outlived 2 of them, decided that a portrait must be painted. "The family has a portrait of every duke since the first," she told me, standing in the gallery with her hands clasped, and her chin set at the angle that meant she would not be moved. "There is a space on this wall, Holt, and it will not remain empty because my son is afraid of a canvas." "He is not afraid, your ladyship. He does not wish to be seen. He does not wish to see himself. That is not the same thing." She was right, of course. She was always right. But finding a painter willing to paint the Duke of Pemberton was another matter. She wrote to 4. The first came, saw the Duke at a distance, and made excuses about his schedule. The second came, sat for the preliminary sketch, and produced a study that showed the Duke's right side only, a handsome half-face with the scars conveniently outside the frame. The Duke looked at it for 10 seconds, said, "That is not me," and dismissed the man. The third painter did not come at all. He sent a letter explaining that he specialized in beauty. "Beauty," the Duke said, when his mother showed him the letter. It was the first time I had heard him laugh in 3 years. It was not a pleasant sound. The fourth painter was Clara Voss. She arrived on a Tuesday in October, in a hired cart with 3 trunks of supplies and a letter of introduction from the Royal Academy that the Dowager had solicited through channels I did not ask about. She was 24 years old, slight, serious-faced, with dark eyes that moved across surfaces the way a surveyor's eyes move across land, measuring, recording, assessing the fall of light with a professional precision that I recognized because I had seen it in reconnaissance officers. She wore a plain traveling dress and no jewelry, and her hair was pinned simply, and she climbed down from the cart and looked at Pemberton Hall and said, "The light will be best in the East Gallery. May I see it?" Not, "May I see the Duke?" Not, "Is it true about the scars?" The light. She wanted to see the light. I showed her the East Gallery. She walked its length in silence, studying the windows, and then she said, "The afternoon, 2 o'clock. The sun comes through at an angle that will do beautifully. The Duke may not agree to sit. Then I will paint him standing." She was not joking. I understood this about Clara Voss almost immediately. She did not joke about painting the way soldiers do not joke about battle. It was what she was. It was the only thing she was. She had trained under her father, who had been a portrait painter of moderate reputation, and she had surpassed him before she was 20, and the Academy had recognized her talent but not her sex, and so she painted under her own name and took the commissions that the fashionable men did not want: the aging, the ill, the difficult, the scarred. "I paint what is there," she told me that evening, over the supper I brought to her room. "Other painters paint what people wish were there. That is the difference." The Duke refused to sit. I told her he would. She said, "I will wait." She set up her easel in the East Gallery, and she waited. She mixed her colors. She prepared her canvases. She sketched the room itself, the windows, the light on the stone floor, the portrait frames. She did not knock on his door. She did not ask. She waited with the patience of a woman who understood that the thing she needed would come to her if she did not chase it. On the 3rd day, the Duke came to the gallery. He came at dusk, thinking she had gone. She had not. She was sitting in the corner with a sketchbook, drawing the shadow pattern on the east wall, and when he walked in, she did not stand, did not gasp, did not look away, the way every other person looked away when they saw his face up close for the first time. She looked at him. She looked at him the way she looked at everything, with the measuring, recording, professional precision of a woman who saw light and shadow and bone structure where other people saw beauty or ruin. And she said, "Will you turn your head slightly to the left, Your Grace? The light catches the scarring in a way I want to study." He stared at her. I was in the corridor, close enough to hear. The silence lasted 8 seconds. I counted, the way I used to count the seconds between cannon reports to judge distance. "You want to study the scars," he said. "I want to study the way the light falls across them. The texture is extraordinary. The skin has a quality, a translucence, where the scarring thins near your temple, that I have not seen before. It will be difficult to render. I should like to try." No one had ever called his scars extraordinary. No one had ever looked at the ruin of his face and seen something worth the effort of rendering. He turned his head, slowly, to the left. She picked up her charcoal and began to sketch. He sat for her every day after that. 2 o'clock, the East Gallery, the October light slanting through the windows and falling across the Duke of Pemberton's face, the whole face, the right and the left, the unmarked and the ruined, while Clara Voss worked in concentrated silence, her charcoal moving across the paper with a sureness that I found, watching from the doorway, almost violent in its precision. She did not flatter, she did not soften. She drew exactly what she saw, and what she saw was not what anyone else had seen. She told me this one evening, cleaning her brushes by the kitchen fire while I polished the silver that did not need polishing. Everyone who looks at him sees the scars first. They cannot see past them. The scars are all they see, but the scars are not the most important thing about his face. What is? His eyes. The way his jaw sets when he is thinking. The line of his mouth when he almost smiles, which he does more often than he knows. The scar tissue pulls the left corner down, which means that when the right corner lifts, even slightly. The asymmetry creates an expression that is more honest than any symmetrical face could produce. He cannot hide what he feels. The scars make concealment impossible. And that? She set down her brush and looked at me with those dark, serious, measuring eyes. Is what I am painting. Not a scarred man. A man who cannot hide. The portrait took 6 weeks. In the first week, they did not speak beyond the necessary. Turn slightly. Hold there. The light is changing. In the second week, he asked about her training. She told him about her father, about the academy, about the years of painting difficult subjects that no one else would paint. He listened the way soldiers listen to other soldiers, with the recognition of someone who understands what it means to do hard work that the world does not value. In the third week, he asked to see the sketches. She showed him. He looked at them for a long time, his own face, drawn with a faithfulness that spared nothing and apologized for nothing. And he said, very quietly, "Is that what I look like?" "That is what you look like." "It is not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Something worse." She put down the sketchbook and looked at him directly. "You have not looked at yourself in 3 years. You carry a version of your face in your mind that is worse than the reality, because memory is crueler than any mirror. The scars are there. They are significant, but they are not the whole of you, and they are not the most interesting part of you. And I wish you could see what I see when I look at you." He was quiet for a very long time after that. Then he said, "What do you see?" "A man who went into a burning stable because he would not abandon his horse. That is written on your face as clearly as the scars. Every line of it says, 'This man chose to act. This man chose someone else's pain over his own safety.' The scars are not a disfigurement, Your Grace. They are a record of courage, and I intend to paint them exactly as they are." In the 4th week, he began arriving early. I noticed because I maintained the grounds on a schedule, and the Duke's movements had been unchanging for 3 years. Library in the morning, grounds at dusk, meals alone. Now he was in the gallery by 1, sitting in the chair she had arranged, waiting for her with an attentiveness that had nothing to do with duty and everything to do with the way she looked at him, which was directly, steadily, without pity, without flinching, and with an attention so absolute that it made every other form of looking feel careless. She began staying late. The painting sessions stretched from 1 hour to 2, then 3. They talked. I heard them from the corridor. Not the words, but the rhythm, his low voice, her quiet answers, the occasional silence that was not awkward, but full, the way silences are full, between people who have stopped performing and started simply being present. On the 32nd day, I came to the gallery to deliver the post and found them standing together before the unfinished canvas. He was looking at his own portrait, half complete. The right side rendered in Clara's precise, luminous style. The left side, still sketched in charcoal, the scars suggested but not yet painted. And she was standing close enough to him that their sleeves were touching, though I do not think either of them noticed. "The left side," he said, "you have not painted it yet. I am saving it. It is the most important part. I want to get it exactly right." "Why is it the most important?" "Because it is the part that tells the truth about you. Anyone can paint a handsome man. Very few people can paint a brave one." He looked at her. She looked at the canvas. And then, so quietly I almost missed it, he reached out and touched the edge of her sleeve, and she did not pull away. She finished the portrait on a Sunday afternoon in November. She called the Duke and the Dowager and myself to the gallery. I do not know why she included me, except that she had watched me watching over him for 6 weeks, and perhaps she understood that I was not merely the groundskeeper, and she turned the canvas to face us. I have seen many things in my life. I have seen cavalry charges and burning cities and men die with extraordinary grace. But I have never seen anything like the moment the Duke of Pemberton looked at his own portrait for the first time, when she had painted him whole, both sides. The right, with its unmarked handsomeness, its strong jaw and dark eye. The left, with every line of scarring rendered in precise, unflinching detail, the tight, shiny skin, the pulled corner of the mouth, the narrowed eye behind its damaged lid. But the way she had painted the scars was unlike anything I had expected. They were not hidden. They were not softened. They were illuminated. She had used the October light, that slanting, golden afternoon light she had chosen on the first day, to catch the texture of the scarring in a way that made it luminous, almost beautiful, a landscape of survival, painted with the same care and reverence that other artists gave to silk and jewels. And his eyes. She had painted his eyes looking directly out of the canvas, and they were not the eyes of a ruined man. They were the eyes of a man who had gone into a fire and come out alive, and who was looking at the viewer with a steadiness that said, "I am here. I survived. Look at me." The dowager wept. She pressed her handkerchief to her mouth and wept without sound, because she had not seen her son clearly in 3 years. He kept his face turned, stayed in shadow, avoided direct light, and the portrait showed her what Clara Voss had seen from the beginning, that the scars had not destroyed him. They had simply made him harder to look at for people who did not know how to look. The Duke stood before the canvas for a full minute. Then he turned to Clara and said, in a voice I had not heard him use since before the fire, open, unguarded, with a rawness that made me look away because it was too private to witness. "You showed me what you see. I showed you what is there, Your Grace. I showed you what has always been there. You simply could not see it, because you were looking with the wrong eyes." He married her in February, in the estate chapel, with the scars uncovered and the portrait hanging in the East Gallery, where the light caught it every afternoon at 2. Clara continued to paint. She painted the tenants, the servants, the groundskeeper. She painted me, and I will say only that she saw things in my old face that I had not known were there, and it unsettled me in the way that truth always unsettles. The Duke came out of his exile. He returned to Parliament. He attended dinners. He walked through the village with his face uncovered and his wife on his arm, and the people who had whispered about the scarred Duke fell silent, not because they had stopped seeing the scars, but because they had started seeing the man. No one would paint the Duke of Pemberton. They saw the scars and looked away. Clara Voss saw the scars and looked closer, and what she showed him, in charcoal, in oil, in the steady, unflinching clarity of her gaze, was the thing he had forgotten in 3 years of darkness, that he was still worth looking at, that the fire had taken his beauty, but not his substance, that the face the world called ruined was, to the woman who painted it truly, the most extraordinary face she had ever seen.